What is the most disturbing thing to know? I work as an anesthesiologist. I've put people to sleep in an emergency situation knowing that they will almost certainly not survive the surgery. These are generally situations where without surgery the patient will not survive, but even with surgery the chances of survival are still small. In most of these instances the patients are too obtunded or aren't conscious enough to be aware of the gravity of their situation, but in a number of instances the patients have been conscious, talking although clearly anxious. I try to reassure and tell the person that we won't leave their side, that we will take care of them and that they will be fine. It kind of fucks me up a bit to say this to someone, but I always include the last part because I just don't see the point in telling them the truth. I had one guy tell me he felt like he wasn't going to make it. I told him he would make it but knew he wasn't going to. I put him to sleep knowing that the last human face he would see before he died was mine as he stared up at me as I held an oxygen mask over his mouth and nose. I consider myself quite a resilient person, but knowing this stuff is a bit of a load to carry around. Alright, that's enough of this thread for today. Yep, first post and I am out of here. Kudos to that dude, he's a fucking hero, but no thank you. I am not strong enough to carry that kind of weight. That the adults don't know what's going on either. Reminds me of a quote, and GT, anyone who isn't confused doesn't really understand the situation. There's another one that I don't know exactly, but it goes something like, when you reach the age your parents had you and realize they were people just like you who also didn't have a clue. I worked as a palliative carer for about 3 years. I looked after terminally ill people who had chosen to die at home after being discharged from hospital. After a while, you learn some telltale signs that people are deteriorating. After a bit longer, you start to learn how long people generally have left, even down to a few hours. I always went with honesty. I felt it was my job to support the patients' families as well as the patients, so if they asked how long I thought they had left I would answer honestly, obviously with the disclaimer that I wasn't a doctor and I could only base it on my previous experiences. The wife of one of my patients told me that their children, adults, were visiting the following weekend to say their goodbyes. I had to decide carefully on what to say next, but I ultimately chose to recommend that they visit the following day. At the latest, I regretted saying it because she was devastated. She took my advice and her husband passed away peacefully 48 hours later, after seeing his kids. I'm glad I did it, but upsetting that lady was absolutely gut-wrenching. Some people didn't want to know, and it was their right not to know. That was the worst. In those cases, you had to not say anything. Sometimes they'd say, "See you tomorrow," and I had to reply, "Yes, have a good night and I'll see you in the morning," knowing full well that they were going to pass in the night. Edit. Wow, thank you all for your kind words. It is a very difficult but rewarding job. I am no longer a carer, but I often think about whether I would be able to do it again. I've had one question asked a lot in the replies, so I'll answer it here. Death, like life, is different for everybody. Certain conditions will cause the body to deteriorate in different ways. I'm going to spoiler this next bit because it might be too much for some to read, and COPD was a common condition I saw, that was a gradual decline until the patient could no longer breathe and the oxygen just wasn't able to get in anymore. Heart failure was similar, a very drawn-out process. I cared for a lot of cancer patients, some younger than my parents, which was quite distressing. What tended to happen was the symptoms they already presented would worsen, beyond the point that their medication could alleviate it. They would lose energy, ultimately being bedbound. The biggest giveaway was when they no longer wanted to drink water. That was usually a 72-hour warning. When they were very close, their skin would start to mottle and go pink/purple. I'm not 100% sure why it happened, but I think it was because the heart was struggling to get the blood around and it would settle. However, generally you could just tell that the person you'd been seeing for days, weeks, months, or even years just wasn't the same as they were a few days before. Changes could be gradual or sudden. And I went to work with the philosophy that death comes for everybody. If it were me being cared for, then I would want to be cared for in a certain way, the way I tried to care for everybody whose homes I entered. While what you said upset that wife in the moment, I'm sure she and the kids were grateful for what you did for them when looking back later on. Yeah, they were gonna be upset no matter what. The kids would have been far more upset had they not seen their dad compared to how upset the wife was when OP broke the news. Early childhood malnutrition, between ages 0 to 5, causes irreversible loss of IQ, 11 to 20 points, and predisposes people to higher levels of violence. Prefrontal cortex doesn't develop the same. And if you miss that window, there's no intervention that can recover the gap. I live in South Africa, highest Gini coefficient in the world, highest unemployment, third highest violent crime rate, one of the worst education systems in the world, and it fucking keeps me up at night. I wonder, if we changed nothing except introducing a one nutritious meal per day feeding scheme for ECD, what would happen? It hurts. Edit. Firstly, thank you for the awards, comments, and messages. It is truly touching that you are all as moved by this as I am. I am unable to respond to everything, but I appreciate knowing that so many people have felt and thought strongly enough about this to want to participate in changing it. Secondly, if this has moved you, I encourage you to ask along your networks about ways you can become involved in ECD feeding schemes. Write to relevant congresspeople who oppose such initiatives. There is a lot we can do together as communities. This is a small intervention with such a huge impact. Thirdly, so many of you have asked me for a source. The article I read is here. I read it in 2017 and it has since been put behind a paywall, although I reverse searched it this year and found it reposted to other sites. The article is written by Dr. Tracy Ledger, a very prominent food security and social and economic reform researcher, whose work is both admirable and important. She is a senior researcher at the Public Affairs Research Institute and the author of a number of publications, articles, and a book titled, An Empty Plate: Why We Are Losing the Battle for Our Food System, Why It Matters, and How We Can Win It Back. If you are interested in topics of food and nutritional security and food justice, especially in South Africa, this is a good place to start. I will share in the comments a few articles that I found while doing research, both in 2017 and this year. They are not all from the highest reputable sources, journal publications, but do reference journal publications or interview prominent people from this field. I hope this helps those of you who are looking for more info. Lastly, thank you, and bless all of you, beautiful people. No need to wonder, it's a proven effective strategy. I actually work in the field on this exact research. If you want to dive deeper, you can look into the McGovern-Dole school feeding programs throughout West Africa and Latin America. The outcomes for literacy, math, overall attendance and general health by just ensuring at least one solid meal a day are incredible. My son went to a public kindergarten in Brazil, and every day amazed me the focus they had in feeding all the children. He was there from 8 to 5, and he got 5 meals while there. Breakfast, a fruit, lunch, a soup and then dinner, everything made in the kitchen, everything locally sourced. Also they took care that the kid went back home properly bathed. Too bad this level of excellence does not continue in the public grade school, except for the feeding the kids thing, but the actual teaching and the violence is bad. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification. See you on another video. Bye.